of Management Studies, IGNOU presents an audiobook on the course MMPC-001 Management Functions and Organizational Processes for MBA program. Presenting Block 4, Organizational Processes, Unit-14, Ethics and Corporate Social Responsibility.
After completing this unit, you should be able to understand the concepts of CSR and ethics, explain the evolution of CSR legislation in India with its benefits and drivers, discuss the salient features of the Companies Act 2013 and CSR guidelines under the Act, and interpret CSR from different ethical viewpoints. Introduction. You may be aware that ethics denote the concepts of right and wrong behavior in general. In business or corporate terms, ethics is a form of professional behavior, existing organizational standards, principles, sets of values and norms. In the context of corporate social responsibility, that is CSR, an ethical business must act responsibly for the betterment of the social system in which it operates, even at the cost of profits or other goals of the business. The CSR is an attempt to supplement the government's effort of equitably delivering the benefits of growth and to engage the corporate sector in inclusive and sustainable development. Usually the corporate ethics and CSR originates from number 1. Individuals, number 2. Organizational statements, and number 3. Legal obligations. At the individual and organizational levels, the CSR is not a novel concept for Indian companies, as several of them have been practicing CSR voluntarily in the form of philanthropy. However, with the enactment of the Companies Act 2013, the mandate for CSR has been formally introduced to the Indian companies as a legal obligation. Now the corporate sector has accepted the CSR as one of the core functions of management and implementing the CSR programs across the Indian and multinational companies, both in public and private sectors. Keeping this in view, this unit will consider the meaning, evolution, legislation, benefits and drivers of CSR, ethics and ethical views, as well as theories vis-a-vis CSR. Meaning and evolution of CSR. Over the decades, the focus of the companies have shifted from single bottom line approach of profitability to integration of financial, social and environmental concerns in business operations of companies. This transformation, either voluntarily or as a mandatory legal obligation, is the essence of CSR evolution. The CSR is a strategic business management concept generally understood as being the way through which a company achieves a balance of economic, environmental, and social imperatives, that is, triple bottom line approach, while at the same time addressing the expectations of shareholders, that is, UNIDO. Furthermore, the concept implies the need for businesses to go beyond the law to protect the interest of all its stakeholders, such as the environment, their employees, and the communities they operate within. Here are some of the definitions which reflect the evolution of CSR over the decades. Obligations of businessmen to pursue those policies, to make those decisions, or to follow those lines of action which are desirable in terms of the objectives and values of our society. This definition is by Howard R. Bowen from 1950s. Next, businessmen's decision and actions taken for reasons at least partially beyond the firm's direct economic or technical interest. This definition is by Keith Davis in 1960s. The idea of social responsibilities supposes that the corporation has not only economic and legal obligations but also certain responsibilities to society which extend beyond these obligations. This definition is by Joseph W. McGuire from 1960s. Three concentric circle definition of CSR is: the inner circle includes the clear-cut basic responsibilities for the efficient execution of the economic function, that is, products, jobs, and economic growth. The intermediate circle encompasses responsibility to exercise this economic function with a sensitive awareness of changing social values and priorities, that is, environmental conservation, hiring and relation with employees, and more rigorous expectations of customers for information, fair treatment, and protection from injury. The outer circle outlines newly emerging and still amorphous responsibilities that businesses should assume to become more broadly involved in actively improving the social environment, that is, poverty and urban blight. This definition is by C.E.D. in 1970s. Carroll in 1979 defined CSR as: the social responsibility of business encompasses the economic, legal, ethical, and discretionary expectations that society has of organizations at a given point in time. According to Thomas M. Jones in 1980s, the CSR should not be seen as a set of outcomes but as a process that corporations have an obligation to constituent groups in society other than stakeholders and beyond that which is prescribed by law and union contract. ISO 26000 Standards on Social Responsibilities of Organization 2010 describes CSR as an organization's responsibility for the impacts of its decisions and activities on society and the environment through transparent and ethical behavior that contributes to sustainable development, including health and the welfare of society, takes into account the expectations of stakeholders, is in compliance with applicable law and consistent with international norms of behavior, and is integrated throughout the organization and implemented in its relations. Late 1980s and 1990s saw a quest to widen the concept and go beyond CSR with wider acceptance of the concept of corporate social performance, stakeholder theory, business ethics theory, and corporate citizenship. The 2000 onwards has been the era of defining the CSR activities and about legally regulating CSR. Thus, the concept of CSR has evolved beyond the economic component over the years to encompass employees' satisfaction, work safety, community, environment, responsibility, responsiveness, social, ethical, voluntary, and legal obligation aspects. This evolution accepted the fact that CSR involves cost which may not give any direct or measurable economic returns. CSR is about taking personal responsibility for your actions and the impact that you have on society. Companies and employees must undergo a personal transformation, re-examine their roles, their responsibilities, and increase their level of accountability. The Netherlands. CSR is about making a leadership commitment to core values and recognizing local and cultural differences when implementing global policies. It's about companies endorsing the UN Convention on Human Rights and the ILO rights at work. Taiwan. CSR is the contribution to the development of natural and human capital in addition to just making a profit. Thailand. CSR must be locally relevant and meaningful only if backed up by action. The Philippines. CSR is about business giving back to society. Brazil. CSR is about commitment to strive for the best economic development for the community, to respect workers and build their capacities, to protect the environment, and to help create frameworks where ethical business can prosper. Argentina. CSR is about a corporation's ability to respond to social challenges. It starts with developing good relations with neighbors. Companies should make a strong commitment to education, worker rights, capacity building, and job security. CSR is stimulating the economic development of a community. Ghana. CSR is about capacity building for sustainable livelihoods. It respects cultural differences and finds the business opportunities in building the skills of employees, the community, and the government. India. CSR urges businesses to embrace the triple bottom line approach, whereby its financial performance can be harmonized with the expectations of society, the environment, and the many stakeholders it interfaces within a sustainable manner. Evolution of CSR legislation in India. The major developments in the evolution of CSR from a voluntary practice to regulatory mechanism are: Number 1. Long tradition of philanthropy and social activities. Number 2. Issuance of CSR voluntarily guidelines in 2009, which are ethical functioning, human rights, workers' rights, environmental considerations, and stakeholder welfare. Number 3. Guidelines on CSR for central public sector enterprises. Number 4. National voluntary guidelines of social, environmental, and economic responsibility of business, which includes 9 principles of CSR based on the apply or explain approach. And number 5. Enactment of Section 135 of the Companies Act 2013 to make CSR spending and disclosure mandatory. National Voluntary Guidelines. The National Voluntary Guidelines, that is NVGS, on social, environmental and economic responsibilities of business were laid down by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs to help the corporate to formulate objectives, keeping in consideration their impact on stakeholders and environment. The 9 principles of National Voluntary Guidelines are: Number 1. Businesses should conduct and govern themselves with ethics, transparency and accountability. Number 2. Businesses should provide goods and services that are safe and contribute to sustainability throughout their life cycles. Number 3. Businesses should promote the well-being of all the employees. Number 4. Businesses should respect the interest of and be responsive towards all stakeholders, especially those who are disadvantaged, vulnerable, and marginalized. Number 5. Businesses should respect and promote human rights. Number 6. Businesses should respect, protect, and make efforts to restore the environment. Number 7. Businesses, when engaged in influencing public and regulatory policy, should do so in a responsible manner. Number 8. Businesses should support inclusive growth and equitable development. And number 9. Businesses should engage with and provide value to their customers and consumers in a responsible manner. The Companies Act 2013 and CSR. Now let's try to understand the Companies Act 2013 and CSR guidelines under the Act. The inclusion of the CSR mandate under the Companies Act 2013 is an attempt to supplement the government's efforts of equitably delivering the benefits of growth and to engage the corporate world with the country's development agenda. The companies in India are governed by Clause 135 of the Companies Act 2013 for performing their CSR activities. Section 135 of the Companies Act 2013 lays down that: Number 1. The companies with an annual turnover of 1000 crore INR and more, or a net worth of rupees 500 crore or more, or a net profit of rupees 5 crore and more, shall constitute a CSR committee of the board consisting of 3 or more directors, of which one will be an independent director. Number 2. The CSR committee will be responsible to formulate and recommend to the board a CSR policy which shall indicate the activities to be undertaken by the company as specified in Schedule 7. It will also recommend the amount of expenditure to be incurred on the activities referred in that schedule. Plus, it will monitor the CSR policy of the company from time to time. Number 3 is the board of every company shall, after taking into account the recommendations made by the CSR committee, approve the CSR policy for the company and disclose contents of such policy in its report and place it on the company's website, if any, in such a manner as may be prescribed, and ensure that the activities as are included in CSR policy of the company are undertaken by the company. Number 4. It is also the duty of the board to ensure that the company spends 2% of the average net profits made by the company in the preceding 3 financial years, and while spending the CSR amount, giving preference to local areas where it operates. And number 5, if the company fails to spend the amount, the board in its report shall specify the reasons for not spending the same. Though Section 135 makes CSR spending and reporting mandatory, it gives flexibilities to the companies to choose the CSR activities from the list of activities that the corporate can potentially undertake. The CSR Rules 2014. A set of rules framed under Section 135 of the Act came into force on 1st April 2014. It lays down rules for certain aspects. Let's discuss the same. CSR activities. Number 1. The CSR activities taken up by the companies will be as per the stated CSR policy, and activities taken up by the company under its normal course of business will be excluded from CSR activities. Number 2. A company can implement the CSR activities approved by the CSR committee either on its own or through a non-profit foundation set up by the company to facilitate this initiative, or through an independently registered non-profit organization that has a record of being into such activities for at least 3 years, or in collaboration with other companies. Number 3. The activities undertaken in India will only be considered under the CSR activities. Number 4. Spending on activities that benefit only the employees of the company, also known as self-serving expenditure, will not be considered as CSR spending. Number 5. The companies are free to spend on capacity building of their employees, but the expenditure should not be more than 5% of the total CSR expenditure in any particular year. Number 6. Contribution to political parties will also not be considered as CSR activity. And number 7. The income generated from the CSR activities should be credited back to the community or CSR corpus, and this would be over and above the mandatory 2% of profit. Next is CSR Committee. The companies which are bound by the CSR clause are required to constitute a CSR committee of the board consisting of 3 or more directors, of which one will be an independent director. A private company with only 2 directors on its board will have only 2 directors in the CSR committee, and in case of foreign company, the committee will have at least 2 persons, of which one will be an authorized person residing in India and the other will be nominated by the foreign company. The next aspect is CSR policy. The CSR policy of a company will include: Number 1. List of projects or programs within the Schedule 7 of the Act which the company will undertake, along with the implementation schedules and other modalities. Number 2. Monitoring process of these programs. The policy will also specify that the surplus generated from the CSR programs will not be a part of the business profit of the company. Now let's discuss CSR expenditure. All expenses, including contribution to the corpus for programs relating to CSR activities approved by the board, will be included as CSR activities, provided they are in conformity with the activities which fall within the purview of Schedule 7 of the Act. The rules also provide a format for the board report on CSR, which includes reasons for spending of less than 2% of the average net profits of previous 3 years, and a responsibility statement stating that the company's CSR policy, implementation and monitoring mechanism are in accordance with the CSR objectives. The report is signed by the CEO, MD or director of the company. Display of CSR activities on its website. The Board of Directors shall disclose the content of the CSR policy in its report as well as on the company's website as per the particulars specified. Schedule 7. The Schedule 7 of the Companies Act provides a list of activities which can be included by companies in their CSR policies where the CSR spending can be done. These activities relate to number 1, eradicating extreme hunger and poverty. Number 2, promotion of education. Number 3, promoting gender equality and empowering women. Number 4, reducing child mortality and improving maternal health. Number 5, combating human immunodeficiency virus, acquired immune deficiency syndrome, malaria and other diseases. Number 6, ensuring environmental sustainability. Number 7, employment enhancing vocational skills. Number 8, social business projects. Number 9, contribution to the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund or any other fund set up by the central government or the state governments for socio-economic development and relief, and funds for the welfare of the scheduled caste, the scheduled tribes, other backward classes, minorities and women. And number 10, such other matters as may be prescribed. Benefits and drivers of CSR. Benefits of CSR. The CSR offers multiple benefits to firms, including long-term self-interest in the form of higher profit, enhanced public image, and great stakeholder interest. As per C2 2013, CSR is becoming increasingly important for business due to certain benefits. They are: number 1, communities provide the license to operate. The CSR behavior of corporate is not just driven by their values but are also influenced by the stakeholders like government, investors, customers, and community. Today's corporate understands that the license to operate in any particular area is not just given by the government but also by the communities that get impacted by the activities of these companies. A strong CSR program provides the companies with the license to operate and to maintain the trust of the local community. Number 2, attracting and retaining employees. The CSR interventions that help the employees to participate give them a sense of belongingness to the company. Good CSR initiatives can attract employees to the company and give them the incentive to remain motivated and committed to the company. Number 3, communities as suppliers. These are instances wherein, as a part of CSR activities, the communities have been incorporated into the supply chain to enhance their livelihood. Such initiatives have helped in increasing their incomes and ensuring the companies with a steady and secure supply chain. Number 4, enhancing corporate reputation. When the companies position themselves as responsible corporate citizens, it creates goodwill and a positive image, thereby helping them to enhance their brand image in the market. Drivers of CSR. According to the KPMG 2011 survey, the top 10 drivers motivating the corporations to engage in CSR are: number 1, economic considerations; number 2, ethical considerations; number 3, innovation and learning; number 4, employee motivation; number 5, risk management or risk reduction; number 6, access to capital or increased shareholder value; number 7, reputation or brand; number 8, market position or share; number 9, strengthen supplier relationships; and number 10, cost saving. Building a positive brand image, government regulations, alleviation of environmental issues, survival and growth, employee satisfaction, and consumer awareness are other drivers of CSR for various companies. Ethics in the context of CSR. Ethics in the context of CSR can be defined as a set of moral reactions or principles that serve as a guide for individual or organizations' actions and activities related to CSR. Ethics is about reasoning and is important to corporate companies as it allows them to make rational decisions about appropriate CSR programs. Ethics considers what is right and wrong about the ways companies take up CSR programs. Unlike some of the other management functions, The ethical questions cannot be solely realistic but are based on moral priorities which can be discussed and debated. If we undertake CSR programs solely based on our feelings, for example, stating, "I don't like legal obligations in the way of implementing CSR programs," then these cannot be properly debated as it is merely an expression of opinion. If, however, we state that something is morally right or wrong, we need to be able to support that with reasoned arguments that justifies these views. Further, not only should these be reasoned, but they should be applicable consistently in different CSR contexts. Now let's try to understand the different ethical theories or views, particularly in their application to CSR. However, it is worth discussing the certain types of ethics that we may be exposed to in our day-to-day lives. Number 1, personal ethics. Number 2, professional ethics. And number 3, organizational ethics. Personal ethics. Individuals working in corporate sector will have their own personal views on what is right or wrong. When we discuss different ethical theories, we are likely to be drawn to one or more of these more strongly than others. We can see this within corporate sector. Many employees might find spending on CSR morally acceptable, whereas few others do not. Despite a political ethical views on CSR, sometimes we need to abide by other ethical codes which may differ from our personal ethics. Professional ethics. Professional ethics are those accepted codes of practice held by a particular group of people or professions. For example, doctors swear an oath on joining their profession, which can be interpreted as the ethical or moral principles by which the practice of their profession is governed across the country. Unlike doctors, management professionals have no universal and enforceable code of conduct. However, individual companies may write and enforce managerial ethics or corporate codes or value statements. These are a set of principles and rules dictated usually by upper management that define what is right and what is wrong in an organization. It is the guideline that helps direct a lower manager's decision in the scope of CSR job when a conflict of values is presented. These set out the ethical view of the profession and should overtake any personal ethical viewpoints if they conflict with these statements while taking up CSR activities. Organizational ethics. Some organizations or companies may also have ethical or moral principles. Sometimes these might be referred to as organizational values or social responsibilities. For some companies, these can be very important if these are part of what makes them unique or different to other companies offering similar services. For example, Tata Motors' CSR mission states that, and I quote, "To be a responsible corporate citizen by driving inclusive growth with social equity, strengthening sustainable development, and an active participant in nation-building process." Unquote. The CSR at Tata Motors is underpinned by more from less for more ethical philosophy, which implies striving to achieve greater impacts, outcomes, and outputs from CSR projects and programs by judicious investment and utilization of financial and human resources, engaging in like-minded stakeholder partnerships for higher outreach benefiting more lives. Tata Motors would expect their employees to support organizational ethical views regardless of their personal ethical perspectives related to CSR. Ethical views or theories. There are differing ethical views or theories distinguished by moral philosophers which could apply to business organization as well while undertaking CSR activities. Some of these are contrasting positions which might lead to markedly different positions about what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in business. There are 3 views or theories that are widely described positions when considering business and CSR. They are contractarian view, utilitarianism or consequentialism view, and the third is deontology view. Contractarian view. The key principle of this view is morality is based on agreement. This view suggests that being moral is in your own self-business interest and agreements. By showing consideration for the CSR developmental activities, we are really behaving in a way that is for our own business stake. Part of these arguments suggest that only corporate companies are truly able to make business contracts, and as poor communities cannot, then corporate companies only need to treat poor communities effectively. This moral position suggests that using social system resources for business benefit and vice versa is acceptable. Utilitarianism or consequentialism view. The key principle of this view is morality is about maximizing business and community well-being. John Stuart Mills contributed greatly to this view of ethics. He said that actions are right in proportion as they tend to promote happiness, wrong as they tend to produce the reverse of happiness. This theory belongs to a general category called utilitarianism. At its core, this theory underscores the importance of utility. Every action is based on a particular goal and outcomes. The aim of this view is to maximize the benefits to the community and to always attempt to bring about the best possible consequences from our business actions, taking into account all those affected by the decision. Utilitarianism holds that the most ethical choice is the one that will produce the greatest good for the greatest number. It is also the most common approach to moral reasoning used in business because of the way in which it accounts for cost and benefits. However, because we cannot predict the future, it's difficult to know with certainty whether the consequences of our actions will be good or bad. This is one of the limitations of utilitarianism. Deontology view. The key principle of this view is, and I quote, morality of an action should be based on whether the action itself is right or wrong under a series of rules rather than based on the consequences of the action. Unquote. Unlike consequentialism, deontological ethics are concerned with what people do and not the consequences of their actions. The key principles are, number 1, do the right thing because it is the right thing to do. And second is, avoid doing wrong things because they are wrong. This philosophical position believes that you cannot justify an immoral action by showing that it produced good consequences, whereas consequentialism would argue that there is no such thing as a moral or immoral action. Thus, people have a duty to act according to the rights and wrongs of the act, regardless of the consequences. This view is most famously associated with the 18th century philosopher Immanuel Kant, in comparison to consequentialists who would consider what things are good and then identify the right actions to achieve that. Deontologists would first consider the right actions and then proceed from there. Now let's summarize the unit. In this unit, we discuss the concept and development of different facets of CSR over the decades. We also discuss the evolution of CSR legislation in India, national voluntary guidelines, how the CSR was made mandatory under the Companies Act 2013, benefits and drivers of CSR. In the second part of the unit, we discuss the concept of ethics in the context of CSR vis-a-vis personal, professional and organizational ethics. Then we discuss the three major ethical views or theories like contractarian, utilitarianism, consequentialism and deontology views. And that's how we have discussed the concept of corporate social responsibility.
You were listening to the audiobook by the School of Management Studies, IGNOU for MBA program. Course code MMPC-001, Management Functions and Organisational Processes. Course Coordinator, Professor Srilata, School of Management Studies, IGNOU. Voice over by Harpreet Kaur. Edited by Tarannum Jahan. Program assisted by Jagbandhu Jana. Program produced by Manoj Kumar Singh. This program was brought to you by Electronic Media Production Center of Indira Gandhi National Open University.